The kick landed so hard that I forgot how to breathe. I had one hand against the conference table and the other wrapped around my 8-month pregnant belly when my husband, Daniel, kicked me. Not because I had attacked him. Not because I had threatened his secretary. Because I had pushed Vanessa away after finding her with her arms around my husband's neck. She stumbled backward, dramatically clutching her shoulder. Daniel, she hurt me. I stared at him. Are you seriously going to believe her? His face was cold. You put your hands on her. She was touching you. She's my employee. She was sitting on your desk wearing your jacket. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. Then Vanessa began crying. I was just trying to comfort him. I almost laughed. Comfort him? My husband had been coming home late for months. He stopped touching me. He started locking his phone. Every time I asked where he had been, he accused me of being paranoid. And now I knew why. I took 1 step toward him. Daniel, we're having a baby. His eyes dropped to my stomach. Then he said something I would remember for the rest of my life. You should have thought about that before hating her. His shoe drove into my belly. I collapsed. The pain was immediate and terrifying. I heard Vanessa scream for someone to call an ambulance. But Daniel didn't kneel beside me. He knelt beside her. Are you okay? That question broke something inside me. At the hospital, doctors rushed me into an examination room. I heard nurses talking quickly. Monitors beeped around me. Then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. My baby's heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. I closed my eyes and cried. An hour later, my father walked into the room. He wasn't there as my father alone. He was the president of the company Daniel had spent 6 years trying to impress. Dad placed a folder beside my bed. I'm going to ask you something, sweetheart. I looked at him. Do you still want to be married to that man? I couldn't answer. Dad opened the folder. Because after what I found out today, I don't want you anywhere near him. Then he looked me directly in the eyes. And I'm going to make Daniel pay a price he never imagined. Dad didn't wait for my answer. He pulled a chair beside my hospital bed and opened the folder. The first thing inside was a photograph. Daniel and Vanessa. Not at the office. Not at a business dinner. They were standing outside a hotel at 11:43 at night, his hand resting on her waist. I stared at it until the image blurred. How long? Dad's voice was quiet. Almost 8 months. 8 months. I touched my stomach. My pregnancy was 8 months along. Dad turned to another page. Bank transfers. Daniel had been sending Vanessa money every month. Then came hotel receipts, expensive jewelry, private dinners, and apartment payments. My hands started trembling. Why didn't you tell me? I needed proof before I destroyed your marriage. I looked at him. You think I still have a marriage? Dad didn't answer. Instead, he placed one final document in front of me. It was a life insurance policy. My name was listed as the insured person. Daniel was the beneficiary. The policy had been increased 3 months ago. I felt sick. Why would he do this? Dad leaned closer. Because Vanessa isn't just his secretary. I looked up. She told Daniel she was pregnant. The room went silent. Dad continued. She convinced him that her baby was his. Daniel believed he needed to get rid of you before your daughter was born. My heart stopped for a second. My daughter? Dad nodded. The prenatal records confirm you're carrying a girl. I looked down at my belly. Daniel knew that. He had kissed it every night. He had talked to our daughter. He had promised me we would be a family. And all that time, he was planning something else. Dad reached into the folder again. This is why I asked my investigators to watch him. He handed me a recording. Daniel's voice filled the hospital room. I don't care what happens to her after the baby is born. I just need the insurance money and the house. Vanessa laughed. And then we'll finally have everything. My eyes filled with tears. But Dad wasn't finished. He placed another document on my lap. A property agreement. Daniel had already tried to transfer our house to Vanessa. There was only one problem. He had forged my signature. Dad looked at me. You wanted to know what I'm going to make him pay. I nodded. He closed the folder. Not just for what he did to you. He paused. For everything he thought he could steal from my daughter. I thought the worst part was learning Daniel had been sleeping with Vanessa. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing how carefully they had planned my disappearance. Dad called his investigator on speaker. Tell her everything. A man's voice came through. We started following Daniel 6 weeks ago. He met Vanessa at a private clinic twice. Both appointments were under false names. I swallowed. Why a clinic? The investigator hesitated. Because Vanessa wasn't pregnant. I looked at Dad. What? She lied to Daniel, he said. Apparently, Vanessa had convinced my husband she was expecting his child. She knew Daniel was desperate to have a son because his family business had no male heir. But the investigator had discovered something else. Vanessa had never been pregnant. She had been using the story to manipulate Daniel into believing he needed to get rid of me. I closed my eyes. So she wanted the money. Yes. And Daniel believed her. He wanted to believe her. That distinction hurt. Dad opened another file. Inside were screenshots of Daniel's messages. One said, after the accident, make sure she doesn't survive long enough to change anything. Another said, the baby has to be gone too. Otherwise the trust stays locked. My fingers went cold. What trust? Dad finally told me the part he'd kept hidden. Before my grandfather died, he had created a family trust for me and my children. Daniel couldn't touch it while I was alive. But if I died, he could become the legal guardian of our daughter and eventually control everything. Suddenly, the life insurance wasn't the real prize. It was only the beginning. My baby was the key. I stayed at Dad. He doesn't just want me dead. No, he wants my daughter. Dad nodded. Then the hospital door opened. Daniel walked inside. He was carrying roses. His eyes immediately went to my stomach. I heard you were awake. Dad stood. You have 5 minutes. Daniel looked at him, then at me. Can we talk privately? I shook my head. No. His expression hardened. Then he leaned toward me and whispered, you're making a huge mistake trusting your father. I looked into his eyes. For the first time, I wasn't seeing my husband. I was seeing a man who had already planned my funeral. And he still believed I didn't know. Daniel kept the roses in his hands like they were proof he was still a good man. I came because I was worried, he said, forcing a smile. Dad folded his arms. You were worried enough to kick my pregnant daughter. Daniel's jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. I looked at him. Then tell me exactly what it was like. He glanced toward the hallway, checking whether anyone was listening. Vanessa panicked. You shoved her. I reacted. You reacted by kicking your wife. I lost control. No, Dad interrupted. You revealed your control. For a second, Daniel's mask slipped. The softness disappeared. The impatience underneath finally showed itself. He set the roses on the bedside table. I don't know what you've been telling her. Dad pulled out his phone. I haven't had to tell her much. You've done that yourself. He pressed play. Daniel's own voice filled the room again. After the accident, make sure she doesn't survive long enough to change anything. Daniel's face went white. That recording's illegal. No, Dad replied calmly. It's admissible. Daniel turned to me. Claire, look at me. I refused. You know me. I thought I did. He took a step closer. You're letting your father destroy our family. I laughed through my tears. You destroyed it the moment you chose her over your daughter. His eyes flickered toward my stomach again. Not toward me. Toward the baby. That terrified me more than his anger ever had. A nurse entered to check my monitors. Daniel immediately softened his voice. Sweetheart, I'm just trying to take care of my wife. The performance was almost convincing. Almost. The nurse looked between us, then quietly pressed a button beneath the counter before leaving. Less than a minute later, 2 hospital security officers appeared outside the room. Daniel noticed them. His smile vanished. "You called security." "I didn't," I said. "The hospital did." He grabbed the roses, crushed the stems in his fist, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned back. "This isn't over." The moment the door closed, Dad's phone rang. It was his chief legal officer. His first sentence changed everything. "Mr. Carter, Daniel just entered every account he could access." Dad didn't react when his chief legal officer said Daniel had emptied the accounts. "Which accounts?" "Personal accounts, company cards, investment accounts, everything he could access." Dad looked at me. "That's not panic." I understood immediately. He's preparing to run. Dad nodded. Then his lawyer added something worse. He also transferred the title of the lake house. My heart sank. To Vanessa? No, to a shell company. Dad stood. "Freeze everything." The lawyer hesitated. "Already done. But there's another problem." "What?" "Daniel accessed the executive vault." Dad went completely still. I had never seen him look frightened before. "What was in there?" The lawyer lowered his voice. "Your grandfather's original trust documents." I stared at Dad. "You said Daniel couldn't touch the trust." "He couldn't." "Then why is he looking for the documents?" Dad didn't answer. The answer came from his lawyer. "Because the original trust contains a clause nobody outside the family knows about." Dad closed his eyes. I whispered, "What clause?" He looked at me. "If you die before your child is born, control temporarily passes to your father." I frowned. "That sounds like protection." "It is." "Then why is Daniel desperate to get the papers?" Dad's expression hardened. "Because there is another clause." He pulled a handwritten page from his briefcase. "If your husband is legally proven responsible for your death or the death of your unborn child, he forfeits every marital claim, inheritance right, insurance benefit, and business interest connected to the family." I stayed at the page. Daniel wasn't just trying to get my money. He was trying to make sure nobody could prove what he had done. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. "I know what your father is planning." Another message appeared. "If you want your baby alive, you'll come with me tonight." Alone. My blood ran cold. Dad reached for the phone. "Don't answer." But I was already typing. Not because I intended to meet Daniel. Because I wanted him to believe I would. I sent one sentence. "Tell me where." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then Daniel sent an address. Dad read it. His face changed. "That isn't a meeting place." "What is it?" He looked at me. "It's the warehouse where your grandfather kept the original trust records." Dad refused to let me go to the warehouse. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he said. "I'm asking you to stay alive." I wanted to argue, but then his lawyer called again. "Mr. Carter, we found something." Dad answered on speaker. "The warehouse security system was accessed 20 minutes ago. Someone deleted the camera footage." Dad looked at me. "Daniel." "Not Daniel. The access code belonged to Vanessa." My stomach tightened. So she knows about the trust. She knows enough. Dad immediately sent his security team to the warehouse. But Daniel's message appeared again. "Come alone, Claire. If your father follows you, you'll never see your baby again." I stayed at it. Dad took the phone from my hand. "He's trying to frighten you." "No," I said quietly. "He's trying to make me desperate." Dad looked at me. And desperate people make mistakes. For the next hour, we did nothing. Then Dad's investigator rushed into the room. We found Vanessa. Everyone turned. "Where?" "Outside the warehouse." Dad immediately asked, "Daniel?" "Not with her." The investigator placed a photograph on the bed. Vanessa was standing beside a black SUV. There was another woman inside. I recognized her. My husband's mother. I felt my stomach drop. Daniel had told me his mother had been living overseas for years. Dad looked at the photograph carefully. She came back 3 days ago. Why? The investigator hesitated. She withdrew a large amount of cash yesterday. How much? $2 million. Dad's expression hardened. Then his phone rang again. This time, it was the police. They had found Daniel's abandoned car near the warehouse. But Daniel was gone. And the driver's seat contained something that made my heart stop. A small ultrasound photograph. Mine. The same photograph Daniel had kept in his wallet since the day we learned our baby was a girl. Dad looked at me. He's not running. Then what is he doing? Dad's answer came quietly. He's following the plan. I felt the baby move. Then another message appeared on my phone. Your father has 1 hour to bring the original trust documents, or your husband will make sure your daughter never gets to meet you. Dad read the message twice. Then he looked at me. Claire, whatever happens next, you do exactly what I say. I nodded. His legal team had already contacted the police, but Dad didn't hand over the trust documents. Instead, he sent a copy. The original stayed with him. We drove to the warehouse with police following several minutes behind us. I remained in the car. Dad walked inside with 2 investigators. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. Daniel's voice came through. You actually came. My heart started pounding. Where are you? Somewhere you can't reach me. Where's Vanessa? He laughed quietly, still trying to save herself. What did you do to her? She made one mistake. What mistake? She thought I loved her. I closed my eyes. Then Daniel said something I wasn't prepared for. Claire, I never wanted your money. I almost laughed. You emptied every account you could access. That was never the point. Then what is? Silence. Then he said, your father. My blood went cold. What about him? He destroyed my family. I remembered Dad's hesitation when I'd asked about 20 years ago. Daniel continued, your grandfather didn't just fire my father. He took everything. Our house, our business, our reputation. I whispered, so you married me for revenge. I married you because I needed access. The words hurt more than I expected. 6 years, every anniversary, every kiss, every promise, all of it had been part of a plan. Then Daniel's voice changed. But Vanessa ruined everything. How? She got greedy. He told me Vanessa had secretly planned to kill me herself. Then framed Daniel. She wanted the trust and the insurance. Daniel had discovered her plan only days earlier. You kicked me because she told you I attacked her. I was angry. You were willing to kill me. Silence. Then Daniel whispered, I know. At that moment, Dad opened the warehouse door. He was holding a small metal box. The original trust documents were inside. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Vanessa. Her hands were cuffed, and beside her was Daniel's mother. Dad looked directly at me and shook his head. Something had gone terribly wrong. Dad's expression told me not to move. I stayed inside the car while he walked toward me. Claire, listen carefully. What happened? Vanessa came here to destroy the trust documents. I looked toward the warehouse. And Daniel's mother. She came to stop her. I didn't understand. Dad opened the metal box. Inside were the original trust papers, but beneath them was a second envelope. This belonged to your grandfather. He handed it to me. My hands shook as I opened it. There was a letter. It explained everything. 20 years earlier, Daniel's father hadn't simply stolen from my grandfather. He had tried to sabotage the company and blame my father. My grandfather had uncovered the scheme and protected the family. But he had also discovered something else. Daniel's father had secretly promised revenge against his children. The letter ended with one sentence. If Daniel ever enters this family through marriage, assume he came for more than love. I couldn't breathe. Dad looked at me. Your grandfather suspected this could happen. Then police officers brought Daniel outside. His hands were cuffed. He looked exhausted. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his face, only defeat. He saw me and stopped. Clay. I stepped out of the car. You knew about the trust. He nodded. You married me because of it. Yes. And you kicked me because you thought killing my baby would unlock it. His eyes dropped. I was wrong. No, I said. You were exposed. Dad's lawyer stepped forward. Daniel Carter, you've been served with divorce papers, a restraining order, and a civil claim. Daniel stared at him. For what? Dad answered. Everything. The company had already frozen his assets. The house was protected. The insurance policy was cancelled. His forged documents had been turned over to investigators, and the recordings were enough to support criminal charges. But Dad wasn't finished. He looked at Daniel. You wanted my daughter's family fortune. He paused. Instead, you're going to spend the next several years paying for what you tried to take. Daniel looked at me one last time. I placed my hand over my daughter's heartbeat. Months later, when she was born, Dad stood beside me. I never went back to Daniel. I never regretted leaving. Because the day he kicked my pregnant belly, he thought he was destroying my future. He didn't know he was ending the only part of my life that had been keeping me from seeing the truth. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't watching someone lose everything. It's walking away with the one thing they could never control. Your life.